There is a moment, if you ever witness it, that stays with you. A whale breaks the surface of the open ocean, a body longer than a passenger jet, rising slowly, deliberately, into the air before falling back into the blue. The sea barely seems to notice. Nothing challenges it, nothing follows it down. This is how we know whales, enormous, serene, the untouchable giants of a quiet kingdom. But it was not always so. There was a time when a whale was not the largest thing in the sea. There was a time when a whale was prey. That peace is new, and it was not given to them. It was earned across tens of millions of years in an ocean so dangerous that the gentle giants we admire today are quite literally the descendants of the ones that managed not to be eaten. Go back far enough, and you would not recognize them. The first true whales had only recently abandoned the land, their bodies still learning what the sea required of them. They were not yet built for open water, fast, yes, but exposed in ways they could not yet understand. And they were small, some no longer than a rowboat, and they raised their young in warm, shallow seas that shimmered with life. They had no claws, no armor, no venom. What they carried into the water was speed and breath and one another. And for a long time in the ocean of that age, it would not be enough. Those shallows were beautiful. They were also a trap. Because the ocean these early whales were born into was not a sanctuary. It was the opening chapter of an arms race that would outlast almost any struggle in the history of life, a slow, relentless contest between the whales and the sea around them. And in the beginning, the whales were losing. The first thing that hunted them is the part of this story people find hardest to believe. It was not a shark. It was not some sea monster from a distant branch of life. It was a whale. Sit with that for a moment. The deadliest thing in the early whales' world was not some foreign monster. It was one of their own kind, grown vast, grown hungry, and turned against them. Their nightmare wore their own face. In those warm waters lived a creature stretched far beyond the length of the animals it preyed upon, long and sinuous, moving through the shallows with a body that seemed to belong more to a serpent than to a mammal. It belonged to the same ancient family as its prey, a whale itself, but grown into something monstrous, and it had become the first great predator of its own kind. Its mouth gave it away. Sharp teeth in the front to seize, jagged blade-like teeth in the back to cut. This was not an animal that swallowed its meals whole. This was an animal built to dismember its prey, to take things apart piece by piece, and we have direct evidence of what it ate. The young whales it hunted left their evidence behind, small skulls crushed and punctured, broken in patterns that match a single set of jaws. The shallow waters where fossil evidence suggests mothers brought their calves, the safest place they could find, were also hunting grounds. There was no deeper sea to flee into. There was no size large enough to be ignored. A mother could do nothing but stay close and hope the thing in the shallows chose another calf that day. For these early whales, the deadliest predator in the ocean wore a familiar face. They survived it the only way the hunted ever do, by enduring, generation after generation, long enough for the world itself to change. And the world was about to change enormously. Far to the south, a continent was tearing away from its neighbors. As the gap between them widened, the sea rushed through, and a current began to wrap itself around the bottom of the planet. It was cold, it was tireless, and it reached down into the black depths and hauled the cold, nutrient-rich water up toward the light. The sea transformed. Over millions of years, what had been a warm and relatively quiet ocean became a vaster, colder, richer engine of life, far more crowded than anything before it. Food accumulated in quantities difficult to imagine, clouds of it, storms of it. Whole regions of the sea turned dense and dark with drifting life, enough to feed an animal the size of a building, if any animal could grow large enough to take it. And in the ocean, abundance is never safe for long. Where food gathers, hunters gather to meet it. The whales had outlasted a single predator. Now they faced something far harder to escape, an entire ecosystem waking up, hungry, and learning very quickly that whales were among the richest meals it had to offer. The threat was no longer a single set of jaws, it was the whole sea. So the whales did something extraordinary. Not by choice, no animal chooses its own evolution, but under pressure that never let up, they were reshaped. Some gave up the hunt by degrees, first into massive raptorial feeders and then into something stranger still. Animals that strained the living water itself, swallowing the ocean's riches by the uncountable million. And that slow transformation unlocked something no hunter could easily take away. They began to grow, slowly, across many lineages in more time than the mind can hold. They were pushed toward sizes with no real precedent in the history of animals, until the largest of them grew so immense that few things in the sea could even consider attacking them. The hunted had found an answer at last. Not a weapon, not a hiding place, just scale on a level the world had never produced. It should have been the end of the danger. A whale too large to be killed is a whale that has finally won its freedom. But in an arms race, every advantage is also an invitation. The whales had played the most powerful card in the ocean, and the ocean was preparing to answer it. If you're enjoying the journey through Earth's forgotten oceans, consider subscribing. Because the deeper we go into prehistory, the stranger these worlds become. And what happened next would push whales into the most dangerous chapter of their history. For a while, it seemed to work. The giants moved through the open water almost unchallenged, too large for the dangers that had once haunted the shallows. The ocean, it seemed, had finally been outgrown. But nothing in the sea stays unchallenged for long. By now, the seas teemed with whales of every kind, from the swift and small to the genuinely enormous. That much flesh does not go unnoticed. It builds something to feed on it. And what the ocean built, in answer to the giants, were hunters worthy of giants. But one of them would dwarf all the rest. Something was coming that the world had never seen before, and would never see again. Out of the open water came the largest shark that has ever lived. A predator with jaws wide enough to engulf a small car, teeth the length of a human hand, and a bite that could shear through bone. It did not bother with fish. It specialized in whales. Even now, the fossilized bones of ancient whales still carry its signature. Deep gouges raked across ribs and flippers, the unmistakable marks of an animal that hunted the largest prey it could find. And it did not hunt alone. Something stranger shared those waters. And this one was a whale itself, a whale that had inherited the large brain and likely the sound-hunting senses of its lineage, and turned whatever tools it possessed toward slaughter. It carried teeth longer than a human forearm set into both its jaws, weapons of a kind no living whale possesses, and it used them to hunt other whales. Consider what that means. The whales had grown vast for one reason: to escape the hunters of the sea. And the sea had answered by raising up hunters vast enough to drag the giants back down. Everything the whales had become, every slow inch of size won across those long ages, had been matched. The single greatest survival strategy in their history, the thing that had carried them up out of the shallows, was suddenly not enough. For the first time in the entire story, not even size was protection. The largest animals in the ocean could still become prey. The story had come full circle. It had begun with a small whale hunted in the shallows by something shaped like itself. Now it had arrived at the largest whales the world had ever seen, hunted in the open sea by something shaped, once again, like a whale. This was the summit of the arms race, the most dangerous the ocean would ever become. And this is where the story turns on something almost no one expects. The whales did not win this final round by becoming fiercer. They grew no weapon to match their attackers. They survived because the same restless force that had hounded them from the very beginning, the changing ocean, finally turned in their favor. The cooling did not stop. The currents only strengthened, and the richest feeding waters on Earth drifted further and further toward the freezing edges of the world, into the cold and the dark at the top and bottom of the planet. The whales followed. They became wanderers, crossing entire oceans to reach those frozen, food-choked seas, journeys so long and so demanding that even the greatest predators of the warm seas could not follow. They learned to live between two worlds, feeding in the brutal cold of the poles, then traveling thousands of miles to give birth in warmer water and back again, year after year, an endless migration written into their bodies. and the very size that had once painted a target on their backs became the thing that made the journey possible. Vast bodies storing enough fuel to cross a world. Meanwhile, the great hunters of the warm seas began to falter. The enormous shark, built for a warm and crowded ocean, depended on a world that was vanishing. The mid-sized whales it hunted thinned. New competitors, faster, colder adapted, pressed in on what remained. Whether it starved or was outcompeted or both, the sea it had been built for was ceasing to exist. And slowly, the apex predators that had ruled the ancient seas faded into silence, one after another, until they were gone. The whales had not defeated the ocean. They had simply outlived everything that tried to kill them in it. So the next time you see one, when a whale lifts its impossible body from the water and crashes back down in a sound you can feel inside your own chest, remember what you are actually looking at. You are not looking at an animal that was always safe. You are looking at the survivor of one of the longest and most violent struggles in the history of life. A creature descended from small hunted things that were chased through warm shallows, that were torn apart by their own kind, that grew to staggering size and were hunted still, and that finally escaped into the coldest corners of the earth and never looked back. Every whale alive today is the child of the ones that made it through. And the blue whale, the largest creature that has ever existed on this planet, greater than any dinosaur, larger even than the monsters that once hunted its ancestors, is not proof that whales were always the rulers of the sea. It is proof of how much it took to survive one. The ocean is calm for them now. The great hunters are gone. The water has gone quiet. And the gentle giants we believed had never known fear are, in truth, the last survivors of the most dangerous ocean the Earth has ever known. If you enjoyed this documentary and want to explore more of Earth's lost worlds, make sure to subscribe, because the deeper we look into prehistory, the more impossible it becomes. And there are still countless stories hidden beneath the surface.